Nobody prepared me for what I'm about to tell you. Hey, everybody, it's Clint, and I wanted to jump on really quick and talk about something that's top of mind for me right now. So, in business, there's always the things that you're supposed to be prepared for. You're prepared for working long hours. You're prepared for the long nights. You're prepared for the wins, the failures. You know all this is going to happen. But the something that no one prepared me for as an owner, as a leader, really, is how often I would fear getting it wrong. Do you ever do that? Do you ever fear getting it wrong? Look, I know there's going to be mistakes. I know I'm going to do things wrong. I'm going to make bad decisions. But as a leader, so often there's moments in time where I quite honestly fear that I'm going to get it wrong. And it almost always has to do with my team. It's one of those unspoken things in life that if you truly value leadership, if you truly value your team, this is going to hit you. At some point, you're going to be making a decision, you're going to be doing something, and all of a sudden, this knot is going to start billowing up in your chest. It's going to go to your throat. You're going to get flushed, and your cheeks are going to get red. And you're going to think, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? My team's bought in. Everything's going to go great. But what if it doesn't? What are they going to think? What if this doesn't work out either? Because, I had that thing before that I just knew was going to work and it didn't work. But what if this doesn't work too? And so I want to talk just a little bit about how you overcome this as a leader, because this can be paralyzing. It can not only can it be paralyzing, more dangerous is that you actually start taking riskier things to prove your leadership ability. So I want to talk really quick about this fear-based decision making and how to actually overcome it. So the first thing is that when I recognized this was a problem, is I was building our home care business and we were growing exponentially. We were growing really, really quickly. And it seemed like things were working. I would start a system and it would work. I would hire someone and they would really take off. But at some point in time, it didn't work. And I remember when it didn't work because I had hired this person. It was a marketer. And everything was supposed to be great about this person. They had helped 2 or 3 other businesses build businesses. They had grown agencies bigger than us. Like it all seemed to line up. But then about 3 months in, we had gotten 0 traction from this person. And I got a call from a referral partner and asked how we were doing. And they said, well, it seems like that when, so-and-so comes in, they're kind of begging for cases. They're like, we'll take anything, give us a chance to prove it. And so honestly, we haven't referred to you because we didn't know if something was going on behind the scenes. God, it infuriated me, right? So I set the person down and started talking to them. And it wound up, I had to terminate the person because they weren't aligned with us. It wasn't a culture fit. Okay. They were great at their job. They just weren't a culture fit. They didn't understand our marketing. They didn't understand our verbiage. They didn't get behind it. Well, we were still growing and we were still going. But I tell you, that hit me because I spent a lot of money on that. I put a lot of effort in that. And I felt like I had a lot riding on that. So for the next few weeks, really next few months, I second guessed every marketing decision I made. I lived in fear of getting it wrong again. Then I realized there's actually a formula to overcoming anything. Okay? There is an actual formula to overcome anything. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because overcoming this fear-based decision making is rooted and grounded in this formula to overcome anything. And I want you to put in the chat if this resonates with you, if any part of this is hitting with you. I want you to give me a thumbs up. I want you to tell me that, you know, I'm in the book here. I'm preaching it straight. Whatever hits for you, I want you to tell me, okay? So how do you overcome anything? Well, the first step in this is you have to define it. You have to actually define what you need to overcome. Not just, oh my God, this is a bottleneck in my business. You actually have to understand what the constraint is. So there is this theory called the theory of constraint, and you can look it up, a ton of stuff on it. But the idea is that most of the time we fixate or lock in on something and we're like, we got to fix this thing, like recruiting. We need more caregivers. What's the biggest constraint in your business? If I ask a lot of you, you'd probably say hiring, or getting applications, or getting qualified leads, right? The truth is that's not actually the constraint, right? That's a symptom of the constraint. But the real constraint, if you feel like it's recruiting, I need to hire more caregivers. My constraint is I don't have enough caregivers. Well, that's a problem. But your constraint might not actually be you don't have enough caregivers. It might be that your utilization rate is off. Because you might actually have 50 caregivers that are on your payroll, but only 25 of them consistently get checks. So the reality is it's not just getting more caregivers, because growing a tumor doesn't help. You actually need to leverage your caregivers better. So the theory of constraint is that you don't actually just fix the things. You find the constraint that if you solve this one thing, it would actually solve 2 or 3 of these other things. Because if we utilized our caregivers better, if our utilization was better, then you know what? Our caregiver satisfaction would be better. Our retention numbers would be better. We'd probably have a higher client satisfaction. That one thing instantly connects to a lot of other things. So that's the theory of constraint. So the first thing you have to do in overcoming anything is you have to define it. What actually is the constraint we're facing? The next thing you have to do is identify it. Now, this is going to sound like, Clay, you just said define it. Now you're saying identify it. That's kind of the same thing, right? It is. It's actually totally different. So defining it is understanding the constraint. It's kind of like finding the bucket, right? It's not finding the holes. It's actually realizing, hey, this is the bucket that has the holes, right? So think of defining it as a blinking light on the dashboard. Identifying it is seeing what that light actually connects to. Okay, so if we define and say, okay, the actual constraint that I'm battling here isn't just caregivers, but it's actually our utilization rate. Okay, now let's identify, why is that utilization rate off? What's wrong with it? And ultimately, this comes down to a lot of what's helping and what's hurting. So a lot of times you can identify what's helping and what's hurting. And that really is the thing, our caregiver utilization. What's helping it? What's hurting it? Once you identify those 2 areas, now you have data to work with. And this is where once you define, right, then you identify. At that point, you have to move into the third step. Now, at this crux, it's important to recognize that defining and identifying are all internal actions. We're not external yet. Too often when we try to overcome something, we instantly tackle external. I'm going to go do this thing. You don't want to do that. What you actually want to do is you want to start with internal first. You define it, then you identify it. The third step in this process is you have to anticipate it. That means you have to look at the data and say, okay, well, if this helps and hurts, when do we most often have this problem? When do I actually see this peeking around the corner a lot? Well, when we start getting a bunch of new clients in. Okay. So how often do we get an influx of clients? I don't know. No, that's not true. Look back over the past 6 months and see when you started seeing the greatest number of clients come in. Now, most of you have this data for the year, right? Or for years. If you look at that, you can actually start normalizing that data and saying, okay, I see, right, in January, February, hours dip because we're coming into the Grim Reaper months. We're coming out of holidays, right? We're fixing to head into Thanksgiving. So you got all this stuff battling, right? But if you look at your numbers, you actually will see the ebbs and flows in business are not actually random, right? Chaos is not random. It only appears random because of its sensitivity to small changes. So you feel like your clients are random, but they aren't actually. Look over the past 6 months of your client acquisition, see when it goes up, when it goes down. Now, if what hurts it is you get an influx of clients, but now your utilization is off, maybe 2 weeks before you on average will see a client influx, you touch base with the majority of your caregivers to see what their desired hours are, what their open availability is. We used to do this based on school calendars, right? We lived in a college town, so every semester we would reach out. Why? Because what helped us was the end of a semester. What hurt us was the end of a semester. So if we just knew when that was going to happen, we could anticipate it. So you have to define it, identify it, anticipate it. And the fourth step in this is the only external action. It is respond to it. So in order to overcome anything, you have to define it, identify it, anticipate it, and then respond to it. That doesn't mean you're reacting. That means you're responding based on your chaos funnel. You're responding based on your end result, your controllable, non-negotiable outcome that simply must occur. You're filtering it through your known variables, right? You're understanding the skill or the resources, the actions, the support that is required to get you back to that non-negotiable outcome that simply must occur. That's how you overcome anything. And when I did this in my life, so I'll give y'all for instance here. So I used recruiting as kind of my example, and that's because that's a real life case. Recruiting was, we would have said, our biggest constraint. Turns out, though, when we actually went in and identified what we had defined, okay, recruiting is our biggest constraint. Great. Now we got to identify what actually in that constraint, what's helping and hurting. Well, what we realized was what was hurting was our caregiver utilization was off. We were running probably a 30% utilization at the time. And that's terrible. So we had 70% of our care team, our field staff, was underutilized or not utilized at all. Only 30% of our care team was actually being utilized. Our OT was high. We couldn't get it down. And it's because we had this concept that we had to be flexible with our hours. We hired people saying we were flexible with hours, saying that it was a great place to work because, you could kind of decide your schedule. You knew what you were going to work. We told clients they could pick their hours. We had all of these different things that were actually hurting our utilization rate. Most importantly, we didn't communicate it. So we started looking back through everything. It was like, okay, when does recruiting really hurt? Because, sometimes it doesn't feel like we have a hard time getting people. So when are we getting people? When are we not? We found out that during the semesters in college, this was a big thing for us. Our caregiver utilization would tank because we all of a sudden had shifts we had to start covering because people who were working shifts now couldn't work shifts because their school semester had changed. Their schedule had changed. So we started looking through and we realized, okay, every semester we need to anticipate that we're going to have a utilization crisis. So that means 3 weeks before we know a semester is going to change, we have to start implementing an awareness campaign to find out what the new utilization is going to be. And we started setting benchmarks based on, okay, this is the percentage of utilization we want. Now, it took a little bit, probably about 3 months, but we got our utilization from 30% to 86% in about 3 months because of communication. And that brought us to the response. We responded by every 3 weeks prior to a new semester. We would start communicating, updating, getting them to update their availability. Not the availability they wanted to work, but the availability they were able to work, right? Not what's your ideal schedule, but what days would you be available if needed, right? We changed our verbiage. So that is how we actually overcame what we thought was a recruiting problem. Turns out the constraint was actually communication. And when we fixed communication, turns out our recruiting actually was working pretty well. Our clients got happier, our caregivers were happier, and our team was less stressed. That's how you leverage this formula to overcome anything. So, all right, drop it in the chat. Let me know what this struck, how this struck. I want to know what you loved about this. And I want to know what right now is a constraint in your business that you need to actually define and identify. Drop it in the chat. Talk to you soon.